All right. Well, welcome everybody. Welcome to Gaming 101, which is part of our Family Room Online series, where we explore ways to make our time with our grandchildren and other family members more joyful and meaningful, and to do it within a Jewish framework. Now, as always, some Zoom etiquette. Unless otherwise requested, please keep your microphones on mute. This is, of course, except for those who are either lying in a isolation tank or participating in a silent retreat somewhere. We love to see your family or grandparental punim faces, but if you like, you could pause your video by clicking the pause video button directly to the right of the mute button. If you have any questions during the presentation, and we will stop during the presentation for questions, but you can post your questions in the chat box, which is you can find in the box in the middle of the screen. And time permitting, we'll open up the conversation for questions and discussions from audience, from members of our community here sometime during the conversation. So, those of us who remember our grandparents remember that they grew up kind of being awe or living in these alien worlds where TVs were new to them and jet travel was new to them and all these things that they really didn't have growing up. And one of the area that's new to me and alien to me as a grandparent is again, if folks could mute their phones, especially those people who live on the Upper West Side. And so the whole world of online gaming is totally foreign to me. But as we mentioned in the invitation, about 2.7 million people around the world are involved in gaming. And chances are excellent that either our grandchildren are currently now involved in gaming, which excludes my grandson who's 2 weeks old, or will be so in the future. Tonight's partner in this presentation, Lost Tribes Esports, has done a truly magnificent job of using the lore of gaming to connect preteens and teens to Jewish life. In recognition of their amazing work, they were chosen as one of the 10 upcoming exciting organizations to watch in 2021 by Slingshot. So I'm delighted to introduce Brian Swallow, Director of Gaming, to tell us more about esports, Lost Tribe Esports, and to introduce today's presenter.
Thank you, David. And I'm here with Lenny Silverman, our CEO and founder, and we'll just give a little bit of an introduction of who Lost Tribe is. Then I'm going to introduce Todd Harris, who's joining us, a major partner of ours in many different programs that we run. As well as while we're going through, if you'd like to ask a question, feel free to type it into the chat, or we can do a little Q&A at the end as well. So whatever feels better for you, we'll handle those questions and answers at the end. So Lost Tribe. So we're backed by over 100 years of Jewish communal experience amongst our staff and our major advisors. We're a global year-round engagement initiative that is using new media like gaming to connect the next generation in new ways. So we leverage media and the content that teens really love and what they're connected to, and use that to engage them in a Jewish life and a Jewish community that we've created. So it's a new online kind of Jewish community center idea for people ages 8 to 18, where they can connect on things that they're passionate about in an environment that's safe, entertaining, and Jewish. So our focus is on the 80% of Jewish Gen Z or teenagers that don't have a Jewish affiliation. They're not engaged in JCC Maccabi or maybe a BBYO region or anything like that. So we try to find a way to engage them in something that they're really interested in, but that is a community of other Jewish teens. So we know that the generation of kids and teens in 2021 are very invested in the digital world for communication, social media, gaming, etc. So we wanted to kind of bring those avenues to you, and so that you can educate yourself and be able to connect with those teenagers in your family, in your communities. And it's an opportunity, I think, for parents and grandparents to actually game with the kids in their family. So I want to introduce Todd Harris, who is an entrepreneur who's been leading video game and esports businesses for over 15 years. He's the co-founder of Hi-Res Studios, one of the largest video game studios in the Southeast, and founder and CEO of Skillshot Media, which is a leading East Coast esports infrastructure and production company. He's also the chair of the North American Scholastic Esports Federation, or NASEF. But the biggest or the most impressive thing is that he is a partner of Lenny Silberman and of Lost Tribe. So without further ado, Todd.
A proud partner of Lost Tribe. Thanks so much, Brian and Lenny. Thanks, everyone. My pleasure to talk with you about one of my favorite topics, which is video games and using them for good, using them for connection. So we've got about an hour together. We won't take all that time. I've got some prepared remarks, but I would love this to be interactive. So if a question hits you, please, you can either raise a Zoom hand or drop it in the chat, whatever's comfortable, and I'll leave time at the end for questions as well. You're going to leave here experts around video games. I mean, your grandkids are going to be impressed because you're going to be dropping some knowledge. But that's my intent at the end of the day is to help you understand this new form of media. So I'm speaking to you from Atlanta, Georgia, where I've been since 1990. I grew up in Raleigh-Durham, bar mitzvahed from Temple Beth Or there in the Raleigh-Durham area. So I've got some Jewish grandparents, meaning my parents. So they're grandparents. I'm not yet to that stage in my life. But as Brian said, I'm speaking to you as a developer of video games. So I made video games for a long time. I also put on very large video game events, thousands, tens of thousands of people gathering to watch other people play video games. Why would they do such a thing? We're going to talk about that. And then I'm also talking to you as a parent. I have two kids, one boy, one girl, who were both were and are big gamers. My daughter's now at WashU in St. Louis, and my son's about to graduate and attend Georgia Tech in our backyard in the fall. So that's where I am. So I'd like to hit a couple topics before we get into questions. First of all, why is gaming so popular? I want to share with you a perspective on why it is so popular and what makes it different from other forms of entertainment. The next thing I want to discuss is I want to leave everyone with 5 specific ways you can interact with a grandchild around gaming, around this passion that he or she probably has. And then the final part, again, we'll just leave for open speed round and anything you want to hit. You might love gaming. You might be a gaming skeptic. Hit me with all your questions and concerns. I'd love to hit that at the end. So let's start at the beginning and talk about just gaming. When I was growing up, and my first gaming system was Pong. I played Pong on a Magnavox Odyssey on the massive CRT in my living room, and then graduated to Space Invaders in the arcade. But at that time, gaming was, I would say, thought about by parents as somewhat akin to junk food. Tolerable in small doses, but don't have so much of it. It's not good for you. I will tell you that the way the research has developed these days, whether it's my University of UNC or Georgia Tech or UC Berkeley, almost every university is starting to research video games. And I'd invite you to think about gaming as closer to protein powder than junk food. Protein powder for the brain. Can you have too much protein powder? Yes, you could have too much protein powder, but in the right doses, it's part of a healthy regimen. And so it is with gaming. So that's going to be my challenge to myself, is that you leave here convinced, if you didn't come in with that assumption, that gaming is like that. A few myths. There's a myth that gaming is mainly an activity for kids. One woman, I think it's Marique, I'm not sure, I'm butchering your name, I think, Miss Candy Crush and Solitaire, but she shared that she plays games, and that's not surprising to me at all. The average age of a game player is 35 years old. And if you look at a particular platform of the mobile game platform, played on the phone in your pocket, it's actually females over 50, which are the highest users of those games. A second thing, you hear these numbers, 2.7 billion gamers, half of the world's population, which is true. Just to put that in perspective, as a business, the gaming industry, you have to take all of the film industry, the box office industry, and the music industry. And if you put those together, gaming is much bigger than both of those combined. So in terms of economic impact, in terms of future careers or jobs, and in terms of just how people are spending their time, it is now by far the biggest entertainment form on the planet, not even close. So those are just a couple of things to level set. And of course, in the time of COVID, everyone's shut in. You probably saw your kids or grandkids spending even more time with screens. The amount of time spent gaming actually was up 70%, 70, during COVID. Music was shut down, sports were shut down. Gaming still allowed for entertainment and connection. So it's big. Why is it so big? What's the big deal about gaming? What makes it so attractive? As someone who spent 15 years developing games, I'm gonna tell you some of the secrets. I'm gonna tell you why gaming is different than other media. Actually, I'll open it up. Who has a thought on what makes gaming fundamentally different than a movie or TV or other forms of media that are popular? Any ideas?
Well, you can interact with it and you can make things happen. I mean, by virtue of your clicking here and clicking there, you can create violence, death, and all kinds of stuff. Or you could build things in Minecraft.
You nailed it. So the first principle is interactivity. And in the gaming world, we often talk about we are giving the player agency. This is a very powerful concept. The player is the protagonist. Romeo and Juliet is a tragedy because at the end, they're gonna die. You can't do anything about it. In a game, it may not play out that way because Juliet may decide to take a different action. The way narrative is approached, the way storytelling is approached in a game is fundamentally different because you, the player, are making choices, and those choices have consequences in the game. And that, more than anything else, is what defines a game as a form of art and a form of media that is different than books or TV or movies. So the first principle is the player has control. Second principle of a game, not every game, but 99% of games, the players are presented very clear goals in the game for them to accomplish. And a well-designed game presents them just slightly outside their capability level of the player. if you think about the sort of things that engage you, Sudoku or a crossword puzzle, you want something that's just hard enough that it's a little bit of a challenge. It feels good when you get it. It's not too easy. And if you're working on a skill, oh, now you're maybe leveling up. Now you're working on the Wednesday New York Times crossword puzzle, because Tuesday's so easy. You're not ever going to get to Saturday. Whoever gets to Saturday, but you'll get to Wednesday. A well-designed game has clear goals presented just at the level where the player needs to stretch to them, develops a skill, and then they're presented with a slightly more difficult goal. So that's the second principle of a game. And we all know it feels pretty good when you get a challenge and you develop a new skill, and now you get something that's a little more challenging. The third element of a game is it provides instant and ongoing feedback to the player. If you've ever looked at studies about the flow state or psychology, what makes time stand still, what makes you feel in the moment, is getting these goals, checking them off, and getting instant feedback on your progress. And because a game is programmed and has audio-visual components, you're getting stickers, you're getting badges, you're getting redo that. So you get instant ongoing feedback on your progress, and they feel really good when you get it done. You're literally getting a little dopamine hit in your brain every time you accomplish that task. And then the fourth major element of a game that wasn't there when I was growing up and playing games, because games used to be single player, one kid in the room. Then they got to be multiplayer in the room. Oh, I'd have my friends over. We could be on the couch. But with the internet, now it is truly a global world. And so the fourth element is social connection globally without limits of geography. So social connection. So now you understand if you have something available to you where you have agency, there are clear goals presented. When you accomplish the goals, you get ongoing feedback, nudging up your progress, and you're connected worldwide with others that you can form relationships with. That is very, very powerful. And it's why gaming continues to grow, even though movies and music and some other forms are a little more stagnant. I'm going to pause there because that was a lot of theory, but hopefully it makes sense. And I want to just see if there's any questions about that before I go to kind of our next section, which are some specific ways for you to lean into gaming with a kid or a grandkid. And I see a hand from Laura.
I have a question. Could I ask my question?
Please, yes.
Thank you so much. So I read that that there's an encouragement for the person to continue, and that if they take a break to go to sleep, they lose points. Is that correct?
So the question is there a penalty of sort for taking a break? So a couple things to keep in mind. Number one, games, just like movies and books, are authored by different people and different companies, and they might have different philosophies. And I want to talk with you about some specific games that I think are well designed with the player in mind. And to your point, there could be some that are more, I would say, exploitive of the player. The reality for most games, though, is their business model wants you to play for a long period of time over years of your life, not to burn out within a week or so by encouraging you to play nonstop. So I won't say there are no games out there that do that, because it's certainly possible that there are, but most games actually have the opposite mechanic. Most games actually have a rest bonus, because it is meaning you earn more points if you're taking a break, and you learn less points if you're playing in a short period of time. And there's two reasons for that. One is they don't want you to burn out and play all of the game in a short period of time. They want you to play for a long period of time, the way you might enjoy bridge or other forms of entertainment over your life. The second period is it's very expensive for a game developer to create the content. They might have 100-person teams developing the art and the levels and the graphics. And it's much quicker for a player to go through them than for a developer to design it. So for that reason, again, they want generally to extend the time that you're playing rather than have rewards that have you finish it in too short a period of time. Now, all of that said, these games at the end of the day, they are sticky, they are engaging, and we're going to talk in a little bit about balance and other activities, because there is definitely a place in a household for monitoring and making sure that not all of the time is being consumed by the game, and monitoring some other things as well that we will touch on. But your point about the particular mechanic, most games don't employ that. They actually do more of the opposite.
So I have a question. I actually have two questions. The first is, how do the gamers make money? In other words, what is the financial model? And the second is, if it's ultimately about social connections where people interact with each other, how does that relate to the issue of people watching other people play?
Great. Two questions. So your first question, and just to make sure I heard it correctly, Laura, your question is, is there a way for a game player to make money?
No, my question is the companies.
Okay, got it. So the way the company makes money, the producer of the game, there's really two main ways. Some games have a one-time purchase, the same way you would purchase a book or something else, between $30 and $60 for a title, and you pay at one time and then you play all you want. Some other games, a very popular model is that the game is actually free for the child to download, but inside the game, there are certain items that can be bought or unlocked with time. And again, different games have different mechanisms, but usually they fall into one of those two camps. So that's the way the games make revenue and pay their employees to make more games. Your second question around watching other people play games. And yes, Terry makes a good point that's worth mentioning, particularly for mobile games that have a large audience. There are sometimes advertisements in the game where which is another way of earning revenue. And that's particularly on the mobile phone that works, where they're free with ads. Your other question is a realization that not only are people playing games, they enjoy watching other people play games, which is very confusing to people. But then I ask them why they watch golf or why they watch football, even though they don't play football. Maybe they never played football. It's very similar. When there's an activity at a high level of skill, a lot of people appreciate that, particularly if they do it themselves and they want to watch other people at that high level of skill. And there's a human drive to compete. So there are platforms out there where individuals can play a game and what's called live stream their game. In fact, I will do a quick share screen. Can you guys see my screen?
Mhm.
So this is a platform called Twitch. It's owned by Amazon. Amazon, the same Amazon if you order groceries or anything else, bought this platform, Twitch, for close to $1 billion many years ago. And it was based on the number of people that are watching other people play games. And the way this works is you can browse by, these are all different game titles, right? So in the same way, if you look at Netflix and you see there's different shows, these are different games. But if I click one of these, I'm not playing the game, I'm seeing other people play the game that I can watch. So here's a person right now who's playing this game, and there's 32,000 other people watching this individual play this game right now. So 32,000 people are watching, looks like a Latino gentleman play this game for an audience, and they're discussing the game on the side. And there's, at any given time, millions of people watching other people play different games. I'm going to stop, and before we get off too much of a tangent, close Twitch because I could spend a lot of time on that.
Can I ask one more question?
Yeah, please.
Obviously, there are so many games, and so the kind of goals for each game, I assume, would be different. But what about the games where you're killing and warring and fighting and et cetera, which, you know, at least you used to hear more about it. And the games that have more constructive outcomes, are they as popular, or are they really divided into different categories?
Both are very popular, Renee. So there's a rating system. One of the tips I'm going to leave you with is to understand that games are rated the same way movies are rated. Everything from E for everyone, really nothing objectionable at all the way through T for teen, all the way to really adult only, or M for mature, which is where you see some of the more mature and specifically kind of violent or depictions of violence. And across all of those ratings, you will find very, very popular titles. So one of the most interesting findings is that even a genre that is somewhat considered more taboo, or at least more adult, that of the first person shooter, these are titles where there's depiction of a firearm. And these, by the way, are generally titles that are not played in school settings or youth settings for a lot of good reasons. They're targeted for adults. But the research actually shows that some of the cognitive benefits of those are extremely strong. I mean, specifically surgeons playing this game and then operating after have better results. Your hand-eye coordination when driving is better. Your peripheral vision is stronger. And that's because if you imagine a game of hide and seek and you for a minute forget about the depiction, it exercises some of these abilities. Now, the super encouraging thing is that many game developers are working on similar types of games without the depiction of firearms at all. So there's one that's around the game of dodgeball that's very popular right now that has the same sort of skill development. So at the end of the day, just like movies, just like books, there is content across the spectrum from young adult to very mature to E for everyone. And it's pretty important to consider that, not to paint them all with a good brush as being appropriate or non-appropriate, but do a little homework. And in addition to the ratings, jumping ahead, I really like a website called commonsensemedia.org. They rate, they have parent reviews and kid reviews, not just for games, for movies and television, but they do a pretty good job for video games as well. So if you have a questionable title that someone is playing, I would recommend that you go to that site and then have a conversation, about that title based on the feedback from that site.
Thank you.
Jane Lewick here. Similar to the previous question, are there any regulations about hate speech?
Yeah, there is regulation, and there's also when a game is online, the game publisher really has a strong incentive to keep their community pleasant for other people. And you'll hear the term toxic or toxicity, which could be something as extreme as hate speech or bullying or just not being a pleasant person over the internet. And most online games that allow voice over chat or text chat where you could say something that is, inconsiderate or beyond, most of those games have a report feature, so that if someone says something to me, I can report the individual, which then allows the game publisher who controls that community to take action on that. If it's really a very kid-friendly game, most of those games don't even allow, or many of them don't even allow, free text or free voice chat if it's a very young audience. That way there's guardrails around that entirely. Also, many games allow the individual to say, I want to, for myself, turn off text chat and voice chat and just not even worry about it, or to be able to block an individual. So if Brian says something insulting to me, I never want to hear from Brian again. I can kind of block him in the same way you might block someone in Facebook. So these tools are generally available. They're good to know about, and they're really part of talking to a child about, what I call digital citizenship, which is not specific to games. It's when you're on Zoom, it's when you're on Facebook, it's when you're on social media. But for many young people, games is an opportunity to have this conversation, and to have this conversation, when the child's a little younger and a little more open to feedback and having,
I didn't know what I
some
was
good
doing.
habits.
Take a 2-hour hit now from Guriel.
All right, I'm gonna move on. I love this conversation, and it's kind of getting into my next section. So I want to kind of hit a couple points and then open it up again, because these are great, hopefully practical for you. Great for me to hear questions. So the next thing I wanted to share are really 5 things to consider around interacting with your child or grandchild around gaming and their habits. And let's start with the first one, which is, this is just an amazing opportunity to open up lines of communication about their gaming enjoyment, or in many cases, passion. And it might seem kind of intimidating if you're not a gamer, if you don't understand the Xbox or don't understand Twitch, or, but this is a chance, I think, to be legitimately curious about what your grandchild is into. What game is he or she playing right now? Oh, why did he choose that game? Is he playing with somebody else right now? Does he know that person? Did he meet that person online? Is it a real life friend from school? What are they trying to do? How do you win? How do you win this game? What are you trying to do? What are the goals? What level are you? Can you gain skills? So just literally having this conversation and being authentically curious is great. And with a young child, really just opening up this conversation, this is helpful in terms of ensuring safe practices online, right? Just that you're even having the conversation, so that if the child encounters something, doesn't know maybe what to do, it is not bringing it up. You already mentioned that he's into Fortnite or into Minecraft or watching something on Twitch, right? You already have this relationship and this conversation open. So, in the same way, it's like having the sex talk might be a little bit awkward as a parent, but it's a good idea in the long term. Like have the tech talk, have the technology talk, and start it with games if they're into games. So that's kind of my first point, is just make it a topic of conversation. Be curious. You don't have to be the expert. You're not the expert. The kid is the expert and they can help bring you into that world. So that's kind of point one, is just having the conversation. Point two, we talked about, but it is to pay attention to the content for that game. We had a lot of good discussion. Not all games are the same. Just like you probably wouldn't tell your child, no books, we're banning books, or no movies. It's like, well, which book, which movie? It's the same thing with games. So pay attention to the content itself. Different households are going to have make different decisions around what's appropriate. But if you have the conversation open, you can have the conversation about content. So be familiar with the content, and two things are your friend: the rating system of the game. Oh, what's that game rated? Is that a T for teen game? And then I also recommend this website, Common Sense Media, as a good resource. Just can type in the title. You can see very specifically, what might be areas of concern or not. The third point we also started to talk about, but to hit it again, if the game is online, if they're connecting with other people, use that to talk about digital citizenship. What are some keys to digital citizenship? Well, here's a first principle: be safe with your personal information. Don't give out your name, your address, your age, and games don't ask for any of that. Games ask you to have an in-game handle. You can be whoever you want. It's a made-up name. Don't give out passwords. That's just kind of a first principle: is private information is private. And I think if you have younger kids, below teen, probably the same guideline that you would give them for being in the real world. Be nice to people, but have a little bit of stranger danger. That's probably good guidance. Be nice to people. Most people are friendly, but be cautious. Just, be cautious. Have a little bit of stranger danger. That's the attitude you should have when you're interacting with others online. The fourth point, and with there's questions, we can hit more of this, but the fourth point is, do recognize that with these games, there's a huge opportunity for personal development and skill development, including the soft skills. And if you ever played chess or had a grandchild who played chess, chess is a sport of the mind. I want you to think of these games as most of them are very similar to chess, but you're cooperating with other people at the same time. Not every game. Some are more strategy, some are more fast action, but they're sports of the mind. And that hopefully relieves some of the stigma around them if you frame them in your head around chess. If chess was invented tomorrow, newly, it would be one of the most popular video games. And in fact, it is. If I go to Twitch, I can see people playing chess and people watching other people play chess. It's one of the most popular games to watch right now because it's not any different when it's played in a digital form than many other games. It happens to be more strategy-based. It's what they call turn-based. You can take your time instead of having to make a decision right away. Some video games are like that. So think of it again that way. And one of the great things I saw in my own kids was that what's called a growth mindset. You have agency. This idea that your skills are not fixed and that you can develop them. video games are amazing for teaching a growth mindset. Because when you start out in any game, you're pretty bad. And the more time you put in, you get better and better and better. And what I saw in my own kids was taking that growth mindset in games and then applying it to whatever goals they had outside of games. For my son, it was in cross country and then in academics, and it's that same mindset. And video games can be so powerful for that. And then the final point, oh, there's so much stuff in chat that I'm missing. I have to get back to that. The final point is think about it in terms of career exploration. When you're getting to maybe a teenaged child and they're really into this, I just shared with you, this is bigger than music. It's bigger than movies. So the amount of opportunities to be on the creation side of games or earn a living creating games is very real. And this is a chance too to ask questions about interests. Oh, what part of the game is interesting to you? Oh, you like the character design. And if you have a child who's interested in character design and maybe is spending their free time doodling and sketching characters of their own, maybe that's an art or digital art track in gaming or something else. If they like the crunchy rules and they're always kind of tweaking the game or inventing their own game, maybe they aspire to be a game designer. If they're the type of kid who's always finding glitches, oh, I found another glitch, I can do this. And they kind of like to find flaws in things, maybe quality assurance testing. So there's all these different career paths that kind of get opened up when you engage in some questioning and find out what part of it is attractive to them. And they don't have to be just STEM fields, although that's a lot of it, but music composition for games, writing and narrative for games, meaning English. So a lot of different career paths that can open up. And okay, those were my big 5. Open up the lines of communication, be familiar with the content for this particular game. If it's an online game, use it to teach digital citizenship that will help them in social media and beyond. Recognize personal development and skill development, this growth mindset. And if they are really good at it in games, they can also harness that outside of games. And then finally, career exploration towards the development of kind of maybe what they want to grow up and do next in their life. That was another big chunk of stuff. So let's open it up to more questions and then we'll call it a night.
Just want to point out that we've got 15 minutes left. So we just ask that you keep your questions short so Todd can get to as many as possible. Thank you.
Todd, can you address the gender breakdown of gamers and age as well?
Sure. So there's actually kind of a false perception that it's mainly a male activity. And that's because some of the games, and in fact, the games that are most watched by other people are mainly male, but not gaming overall. So if you look at the amount of people just playing games, including Minecraft, Candy Crush, it is 51% male, 49% female. It's as close to equal as any other activity I've seen, including something like soccer, where we've been collectively working on getting more women in it for decades, right? So gaming attracts plenty of young women. But the genre preferences are fairly different right now. How much it's culture, marketing, I'm not going to get into that. I'm just going to tell you that right now there's kind of a difference in the type of games that are played. The more competitive games are more male oriented currently. I see that shifting over time. But Lee, to your question, just gaming in general, almost 50-50. And similarly, when it comes to age, I mentioned the average age being 35. it really comes down to how much disposable time you have. Older adults game a lot, particularly on the mobile platform. Some people really enjoy passing time with single player games. And then, of course, younger people who have more disposable time also are spending more time doing it. But if you grew up with gaming, you are probably continuing to game, just spending less time, and now starting to be intergenerational. And where I'm talking to you right here, I've got another computer right here, so I can play with my son or my daughter when she comes home, and we can be in the same room together. So that's the gender breakdown and a little bit about age also. I think, Ina, you're muted, but I think.
Sorry, Ina Singer. What about this whole issue of addiction? I mean, I've sat with my 12-year-old and he's so proud to show me what he does and how everything works and where he is. But we just went away for 3 days for to be together and had some family. And every time you turn around, he was at the Xbox. In fact, I was livid to know that the Xbox was packed and he could bring it with him. But, he's, we have to do this. We're going fishing, we're going canoeing, whatever it is, a moment's free and he's right at that machine. And it drives me crazy.
Yeah, I think it's it's certainly a real challenge, Ina. And I think that, different households handle it differently, right? Some limit screen time. In our household, because I made games, I went a different way and I just kind of emphasized balance. So for us, it was all about, well, your grades have to be this, you have to have X hours of physical activity. I don't care where it is, for some households, might be dinner time, kind of establishing what has to be met in order to engage with gaming. And we didn't limit it, but we made sure these other obligations were met. But some households just simplify it and say, no, you get an hour a day and that's all you get, and that's the choice they're making. So I think that I wouldn't use personally the term addiction. And there's a lot of the World Health Organization actually at one time called it addicting. And then when COVID came out, they reversed it and said, actually, everyone should be playing games. So, it certainly can consume more time than might make sense for their other responsibilities. And that's just something that you've got to watch, right? Another thing to think about is what it is displacing, because if you take a balance approach, for many households, what it actually displaced was time sitting passively in front of a giant TV, and converts that into active time. So this may not be the case, for everybody, but it's still screen time. It's just moving from passive, I'm sitting there consuming, to I'm interacting, I'm engaging, I might even be creating. So that's the thought, but I don't discount the challenge. I totally get it.
Well, you've given a whole different slant to this that I really need to process.
Yeah. Well, good. I'm glad it's helpful. What other questions out there?
Would you, when I look at Twitch, for example, and I see, 500 games, is there some kind of a reference where you can look up games and names, kind of know what they're about?
Yes.
Where can I learn more? Not so much about the theory, because I've read some things on theory of gaming, but more about the actual content of games and their process.
So, Lenny and Brian dropped a note for Lost Tribe, so I will put in a plug, because they're selecting titles based on an audience, and they have youth in mind, with an audience, and also they have the side benefit of they're really trying to use games to engage youth with the Jewish community and build connection there. So that, of course, is one great resource for this group. Very specifically, before the call started, a bunch of people talked about Minecraft, which is a great game. I mean, Minecraft is a game that is available on every platform, that is the PC or the Xbox or the mobile phone. It allows a lot of creation and world building. It's really like super Legos, if you want to think about that, in a digital world where you're building. And it is also collaborative and multiplayer. So it's used a lot for education. There's actually a version Microsoft makes for schools. Rocket League is a game that is about cars playing soccer. It sounds a little crazy, but it has the advantage that you could watch it and you would know what was going on. And you will not know what's going on in most of these games unless you play them. But with Rocket League, when the car hits the ball and the ball goes in the goal, you know, good job. It's pretty nice and easy to watch that way. But very
would you talk
challenging
about
to play.
Roblox? Roblox is, my grandson is playing it all the time. He's 9.
Yeah, so I mean, Roblox is kind of a phenomenon right now for the under 12 age, and it's really a platform with a lot of different games on it. I can tell you that my firsthand experience with it came after my kids were older, so it's a game I don't have tremendous firsthand experience with, other than it is a platform. It does allow for chat, so you need to be aware of that. And it's almost like a lot of mini games within that community. So there's kind of a further question of exactly what game they're being played, but it definitely is targeted towards a younger audience, and it has a huge following. Would be an understatement. So,
Thank you.
yep. Great. Just a couple minutes more.
Yeah, Todd, one of the things that makes gaming so attractive to kids is that it's very cool that they get to do it with other kids. It's cool, it's fun, it's spontaneous in many ways. They get to it. So could you talk about the upside and the downside of a grandparent actually trying to come into this world, and whether you know of anybody actually doing it?
That's great. I think that's a good question. I think it's going to depend on the kid, as always. I think if you're curious about their hobby and you catch them at the right point and they get to be an expert about it, I think it's going to work for a lot of folks. I mean, the fact that they're showing you something where they're really good, it's not going to be very natural to you. You're not going to have to fake it. Believe me, like it's not going to be natural. And they're going to get to instruct you, and you're going to ask questions. So, I think don't have to take it all that seriously, but just engaging and ask questions, and hand over the controller and give it a whirl. If it is a game that you actually take to, maybe they impress you with a complicated game and then they go to something a little simpler or one that just strikes your interest. The nice thing is, if you don't live a drive away from your grandchild, you could potentially connect with them online and play the game, right? So that's a pretty cool opportunity.
Todd,
And you might even, sorry, Lee, you might even ask, like, oh, this is a great game. Is there a game that we could play together when you're not here, and see what they come up with?
So that would be my question. How would we actually do that? Just ask them what's a game we could play together, or?
Yeah, I think ask them, and again, if there's a lot of games that are online that play on this computing device that you might have in your pocket, that is a smartphone, an iPhone, right? There's the iPhone as a platform. You're all Zooming with me, so you're either doing it from your phone or from some personal computer. Some games are just played within your web browser. So you're going to have to tell the child, here's what I have. I have a phone and I got the old computer in the living room, or, whatever it is that you have, and see if they could suggest something that you guys play together.
Todd, I still have a problem with my boys. They're playing this game. I forget what it's called. There's a main character that he gets to choose different kinds of weapons, and then he goes out and kills people. I still have a problem with that. How can I not have a problem with that?
I'm not going to say you shouldn't have a problem. I mean, again, it depends on the age of the kids and everything else. But yes, I totally get it. I think are they consuming the same sort of content when it comes to movies, and does that kind of bother you the same way?
No, they're 12 and 15 different locations, and parents control the movies and the television.
Got it. So maybe it's Call of Duty, maybe, I'm guessing.
Just try and guess. I have no idea what it is.
Got it. I won't get a prize if I get it right.
Yeah, they're picking different weapons and guns and things, and then they go out and kill somebody. It just drives me nuts.
Yeah. This is a tough one. Again, like we didn't have to have this battle in our household. They just were not attracted to some of those more mature games. So I can't say I went through that battle myself. It probably won't make sense to you, so I'm not going to try to change your mind, but most of these kids see it. It is literally, if you play chess and you're trying to topple the king, and of course, chess is not a violent game, even though you are trying to topple the king, for 99% of well-adjusted humans, they actually see the video game that way. And I'm not going to try to change your mind on that. But I can just say that, there are societies like South Korea, China, Japan, where video games are played much, much higher rate than in the United States. And they have 1/100th of the violence. So it is not the video games that is an issue in our society. And I won't get into more than that, but I'll just put that data out there. If it comforts you, great. If it doesn't, great. I'm just sharing it.
Well, maybe I should learn and go and kill their men.
I would just say my boys are in their 40s and grew up with G.I. Joe and Pork Chop Hill, and did all the things I hated that they did with their little figurines with the guns in their hands and whatever. It gets better.
I had an amazing occasion to go to the Olympics are actually considering video games. And I went and talked at Lausanne to Thomas Bach, the head of the IOC. And we had an exchange where he was sitting next to a professional player of the game Overwatch, which does depict some firearms. It's cartoony. I would say it's Star Wars level violence. It's not realistic, but there's some firearms. And Thomas Bach said, I can't see the Olympics ever embracing this sort of competition. And this young man who played it professionally was like, well, Mr. Bach, what, if I remember right, I think the sport that you play in the Olympics is fencing. And that was correct. In the Olympics, there is fencing and there is boxing, where humans physically beat one another. Video games has the lowest rate of injury of any activity. There is no physical contact and there is zero violence. We have an imaginary depiction of imaginary violence. If we were inventing the sports now and you had a depiction of army men and football where people literally run into each other, I know which one I'd let my son play.
One quick question. Tell us about this in college campuses. Is this becoming a varsity sport and saves universities from having to hire all the stuff that goes around maintaining a varsity sport?
Yeah, there's now 200 universities in the United States where esports is a varsity activity, which means there's a coach, there's some amount of facility, and there's scholarship. Annually, there's $16 million in scholarship for the best video game players. That said, I do not, being a professional video game player is harder than being a professional basketball player. So yes, it will happen for the 1% of the 1%. It's much more likely if you're into games that you're going to get an amazing job programming or doing accounting or doing something else. It is very correlated with high achievers and STEM skills, and a very lucky few go on to play. But to your question, universities are investing in this mainly because the kids are interested. If you're a university, it's all about how do I recruit and how do I retain the best kids? If the kids want a university with a good esports program, well, then you need to make that investment. So that's really why the universities are doing that.
I'm going to take the liberty of stopping us now. If people have additional questions, they should please send them to me at david@jewishgrandparentsnetwork.org, and I'll make sure they get forwarded to Todd. First of all, I want to mention that if you do play esports on the college level, you can get a virtual varsity t-shirt, letter, but virtual only. I want to thank Todd for a fabulous and really wonderfully informative presentation. A special thanks to our partners at Lost Tribe Gaming, again, who have done a magnificent job of linking gaming and Jewish community and Jewish values. Special thanks to Lenny and to Brian. And now for something totally different category, the Jewish Grandparents' next Family Room live presentation on June 23rd is about home composting with your grandkids. We call it Saving Our Planet One Orange Peel at a Time. If you have any questions, please reach out to us at info@jewishgrandparentsnetwork.org. Thank you all for your participation. And again, if you have any questions, please send them to me. I'll make sure they get to Todd, Lenny, or Brian. Brian, Lenny, any closing thoughts? No. All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Great.
And be safe, everybody. Night.
Night. Thank you.